Good afternoon. This is Elaine Cole, the Public Affairs Specialist out of Pittsburgh for Social Security. What we're going to do today is discuss Social Security and how we're with you through life's journey. You look at it as from birth to the grave, and sometimes we work with the person even beyond the grave. So sit back, relax, and we're going to guide you and navigate you through the eligibility factors so you have a full understanding about retirement benefits. Before we get started, I know that you have received the PowerPoint, but I did a modification on the slide number 2. Under my name, I have added my email address because you may have some questions that you would like clarification on, and I would like to be a resource to you as you help others. But to understand the retirement benefits, we'd like to introduce how it can help you as you make your journey, as you have your employment earnings added to your record. So therefore, if you look at it, elaine.cole@ssa.gov is my email address, and I will gladly speak to you about cases that you may be coming across and hopefully provide you the answers that you're looking to help your particular employee. Now, you know that this is unprecedented times when Social Security and we have to continually talk about the COVID-19 update and how you can still conduct business with Social Security personnel. Many of you know that at this point from March, and we have no end in sight, that our employees are basically at home, still working and speaking to the public, but we do not have any in-person interviews that are scheduled normally during a time that we just don't know when an outbreak is going to happen or how we should resolve a problem. So at this point, if you would like to know what we are doing, if you go to our website, socialsecurity.gov, and at that point, if you see that there's a picture that corresponds with COVID-19, those are the most recent updates that we have available to provide service to the public. Although our brick and mortar stores are closed at this point to in-person interviews, we are still open to provide retirement applications, Medicare applications, disability, and also to just answer questions, especially when people have lost their Social Security number, how they can obtain that replacement card, or if that particular service is available online. But I just want to introduce to those that have not visited the Social Security website how they can get the most up-to-date information and also guidelines on how to contact us. The main items that I would like to share with you today is making sure when you go to the Social Security site that you understand how you can get the most recent and the most up-to-date information about your Social Security. If you will notice at the bottom of this particular slide, there's a finger that is pointing that you would just click and that is about the My Social Security application that is very secure. That's why we're called Social Security. And at that point, you can get a lot of your information just by one click. Of course, by creating yourself an account, you will have access, and that will put you in control of your particular benefit. What we will be discussing is the different tools that are available so that that question of the employee has always come up. When do I take my benefits? I might still want to work. I might be a rehired annuitant. What can I do to still collect my Social Security, but I might not be full retirement age yet? We're going to go over all of that information so you can guide your employee through what is necessary to do that planning. The most important item that you want to talk about to the employee is making sure that they have a good foundation if they're contemplating that they're going to collect their Social Security. Of course, Social Security can be a foundation, but you have to have other items such as your savings and investments, such as your pension, the 401k, all of that to build a good financial plan. But a lot of times what we find is that people start to take their Social Security and they looked at Social Security being a larger piece than other items supporting that particular income. Therefore, they find that Social Security was never, ever to be their only form of income. There should always be some supplemental income coming in that would create that plan. Social Security should never be more than 40% of that financial plan. So how do we find that information? Where do I go in socialsecurity.gov in which to find out what I can receive and what my actual amounts will be? So that's why you want to go to the Retirement Estimator. This will provide you really great estimates based on your work history. However, you can also forecast that you may have earnings that will have not been recorded as of yet, and you can actually add that information to the estimator or the online calculator that is available on our website. It will calculate the information ensuring that you have enough Social Security credits, such as 10 years or 40 credits associated to your record. And also with this retirement estimator, you cannot be receiving benefits because we're not able to provide that information if you're receiving a benefit from either a disability claim, something of that nature. But if you're waiting for a decision about maybe you did a Medicare-only application, we will not be able to use the retirement estimator to give you that particular information. Now, if you are age 62 or older and you're receiving benefits such as the survivor benefit, again, we will not be able to use this particular tool. So it's just pretty much if you're 62 years of age and you have not filed for any benefits, you'll be able to use this really handy tool in which to find out a good estimate as for how much you're going to receive. Now we're going to go into more specific details about the online calculators, but the main one that I would like to discuss at this point is the retirement calculator. Now my Social Security accounts are actually interfacing with these online calculators. So that's why you can really get an actual amount as for how much you're going to receive. You will notice on this particular slide that we have the one for the Windfall Elimination provision. We have one for the government pension offset. And there are going to be examples that you will find that this information will come across your desk, and people want to really know what numbers they're going to have in this financial plan. Please refer them to the online calculators because this is going to be a very good tool in finding out what exactly Social Security is going to do for them. Now, let's go to some of the basics. How does Social Security determine your benefits? Benefits are based on your actual earnings. It has nothing to do with other income. All we record in the Social Security database is the actual earnings that you receive from an employer, or if you have self-employment like a business and you are actually receiving earnings from that business, paying Social Security taxes, that information will be assigned to your Social Security number. No other benefits, no other wages are actually posted to your Social Security record. So, all of the years that have been posted to your record, we're going to take those wages and multiply it by the Consumer Price Index for that particular year. And after we get the highest 35 years from your record, we will be able to attain what your monthly benefit will be. So when you see that monthly amount, that is the result of the average index monthly earnings. That is really important to understand because an employee may come up and say, "Are you looking at my last 3 years, or are you looking at just the last 15? No. Social Security is looking at the highest 35 years of wages that have been posted to your record, and therefore that's how we are able to determine what the monthly benefit would be for retirement. Another item that you would want to remember is that if that person only had 25 years of earnings posted to their record, we still are going to look at 35 highest years. So therefore, they have their 25 years. They only needed 10 years to actually be eligible for retirement benefit. However, they don't have the full 35 years, so that would be an indicator that they would have at least 10 years of zeros that would be part of the computation whenever we get that result of the average index monthly earnings. So if they have 40 years posted to the record, again, Social Security is only going to look at the highest 35 and determine what amount that would be once we calculate and see that 35 years, we will be able to determine what that monthly benefit will be. But they don't have to figure it out. They don't have to go year by year using the consumer price index in which to decide, how much they have to receive. But for those mathematicians, there is a 7-step process that they can do by hand in which to determine if the numbers that come from the online calculator coincide with exactly what their 35 years would be. But if you're like me, I let the computer figure it all out. So let's talk a little bit about if you take your benefit earlier or if you wait until full retirement age. Right now, on this particular chart, it shows that people that were born up until the year 1954, their full retirement age is 66. So actually, we're in the year of 2020, so this is the last year that people can attain full retirement age at just the age of 66. As you can see, those that were born in 1955, with the exception of January 1st, 1955, we will be asking that they are looking at 66 and 2 months. If you were born January 1st, 1955, remember, anyone that is born on the 1st of the month, we automatically move their particular date back. So at that point, their birthday would be December of 1954. So therefore, their full retirement age is actually in this year, December of 2020. But if they take their particular benefit early, on an average, if they are to receive $1,000 and they take their particular benefit at the age of 62, then that means they have a reduction factor that will be with them for the rest of their life as long as they collect their Social Security. So if I was born in 1954, I took my benefits at the age of 62, I have a permanent reduction of 25%. And if you look down on this chart, you will see that if you were born after 1960, then if you take your benefit at 62, then you have a 30% reduction factor. But if you wait until your full retirement age, you would have to wait until the month that you turn 67. So in this particular case, this is just a nice comparison so you can see the earlier that I take it, the reduction factor is going to be with me for the rest of my life. Is this something that I want to do, or am I going to continue to work? These are all questions that employee is going to have to answer. Social Security, again, is just a part of that financial plan. So there may be some goals that your employee may not share with you, but that is all part of their decision making as to when they need to take their Social Security. Each person is different. Each circumstance is different, just like our employment history is different from person to person. So we really need to know, if I decide when I'm going to take my benefit, but when is actually that particular benefit going to come into my savings or my checking account. So we look at the retirement payment schedule, and this is when the birth date really comes into play. For instance, if you were born on the 1st through the 10th, you will receive your benefit on the 2nd Wednesday. The 11th through the 20th, the 3rd Wednesday. The 21st through the 31st, the 4th Wednesday. Why is this so important? I guarantee you, you will get the question. I always get my benefit around my birthday, the 24th, and I did not receive my payment. First of all, if you find out looking on the 24th, they should have been expecting that particular payment on the 4th Wednesday. But the month that we're looking at, the 4th Wednesday, is actually on the 25th of the month. So therefore, the payment that they were looking for is not specific to the day. It's as for what Wednesday it will be deposited into their account. So whenever a beneficiary has asked, when will I receive my payment? And they look at the calendar and they say, oh, that's around my birthday. No, you want to say your birth date is on a specific day, but it is corresponding to either the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 4th Wednesday of the month. If they get in that habit, they will always know when that payment is due.
Hi, Elaine. We have a question on the chat.
Great. Thanks, Patricia.
You're welcome. The question is the age 62 reductions prorated each year until your full retirement age?
That's correct. The closer that you get to full retirement age lessens how much that reduction factor will be. So therefore, we were looking at the person that is full retirement age at the age of 66. So from 62 to 63, that 25% reduction is actually reduced to about 22.5%. So that reduction is starting to become less and less as they get closer and closer to the age of 66 or full retirement age. Patricia, does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. There is another question. It says, if you go past your full retirement age, do you have an option to take a lump sum payment on the back pay?
Okay. Now, what they're describing is the person that is full retirement age, and at that point, let's say, to give an example of that, so everyone has a clearer picture as for how that would work. Well, you became full retirement age in the month of March. You turned 66. March of 1954, you were born, and this year you turned 66 in the month of March of 2020. Well, now we're in the month of August, and you've decided, you know what, I heard about these delayed retirement credits, but I'm not interested in waiting until I was 70 in which to collect my maximum delayed retirement credit. So therefore, I contact Social Security either online or by phone, and I decide that I really want to go back to the month of March in which to get my full retirement benefit, because you know that Social Security will go back 6 months from the date that you actually apply for the benefit once you reach full retirement age. So therefore, we're in the month of August. You became full retirement in the month of March. That means that we can go back 5 months, because that's when you turn full retirement age. So those 5 months, we will pay you a lump sum payment for those months that you could have been collecting in the month of March, even though we're in the month of August. So at that point, that's whenever you would have a lump sum payment. However, if we're in the month of your birthday, let's say that you were born in August, you wouldn't be due any back payment because you just turned full retirement age in the month of August. I know it's a lot, but please continue to send your questions. That's the only way to get that understanding.
Elaine, we have one more question.
Oh, wow. I'm coming up.
Somebody says, please discuss the changes in the laws and how this relates to former spouses claiming benefits against their former spouse's benefits. And so is 5 months is the max that they can go back?
Okay. You know what, Patricia, let's hold on to that question, because we're going to be discussing that within a matter of 5 to 7 minutes, okay? So when we get to deem filing, if we could just hold that question to that, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. So let's talk about working while receiving benefits. If you're under full retirement age, there are limits as to how much you can earn. Again, we're only speaking about the actual employee's earnings from a particular job or their self-employment earnings. So they're permitted to earn $18,240. That means that if they go over that particular amount, then there's a 2-for-1 offer that Social Security would provide. That is to say that if you earn $28,240 in 2020, and you've collected your benefit from the age of 62, 63, and you're still working, you've gone over by $10,000. But even though that's excess income that Social Security is looking at, we're saying that you're over a 2-for-1 deal. So that means that instead of $10,000, that particular excess income would be reduced to $5,000. That indicates to that person, the beneficiary, that they should not receive $5,000 from Social Security, or they're going to be overpaid. So how do they not have that particular overpayment associated to their Social Security benefit? You would always want to recommend that they contact Social Security and tell us the exact plan that they have for that particular employer or whatever their earnings are going to be in that particular year. They would give us the best estimate that they would have as for what they would earn in 2020. So if they told us $28,240, then at that point, we will automatically suspend until that $5,000 was not being sent out to the beneficiary. Once that particular amount is spent down, then we will automatically start that benefit again for the beneficiary. But let's say your plans change. Let's say the employee has decided that they're not going to work for the rest of the year. And now they were suspended at the beginning of the year for so many months, but now they want to go back to the limit of $18,240. Just like they gave us an estimate, they can give us a call, and we will automatically put them back into pay, and they will receive the benefits that they had been suspended earlier that year within 30 days in their account. So if they were expecting $1,000 a month and we suspended 5 months, that would indicate that $5,000 was withheld because their estimate of working was higher. Now it's going back to the amount of $18,240. They give Social Security a call. We put that information in our system, and within 30 days, $5,000 will be deposited into their checking or savings account. It's that easy. But you have some employees that'll say, oh, Social Security, they won't catch it. Well, as you know, we have a good relationship being in the federal government with the IRS. And usually the W-2 comes out in January. Shortly after, Social Security is sending notices in February, the month of love, of course, Valentine's Day, and we like to spread the love. We will send that particular letter that will indicate that in 2020, they earned $28,240, and therefore they went over the exemption, and that we want the $5,000 in one payment within 30 days. So even though they didn't think that we would catch up with them, we do get a report every year from the IRS that is constantly talking with our computers, and that is an indicator that it is better that we owe you than you owe us. Now, we're not the IRS in regards to penalties or additional amount or fees on that particular amount. It's just that if you were not to receive those particular benefits because you were working, please contact Social Security right away. This is the same thing for those that are full retirement age and the year that they are actually going to attain full retirement age. So up until their birthday, using the example that I had before, that their particular birthday may have be in the month of August, that is an indicator that I'm going to be full retirement age in August, but from January 1st through July 31st, I can earn $48,600 and still collect my Social Security, and I don't have to have anything suspended because now I have increased my actual earnings power from $18,240 to actually $48,600 for just 7 months, because I am full retirement age as of August 1st, regardless if my birthday doesn't come until the 24th of that particular month. So after I turn full retirement age, August 1st of 2020, I'm full retirement age. That means I have no limit to how much I can earn. So as of August 1st through December 31st of this year, if I make $1 million, Social Security doesn't care anymore. The IRS might care, but Social Security does not care. There is no limit to once you have attained full retirement age in your birthday month. So at that point, they're free to do whatever they would like. That leads me to spousal benefits. What happens is that full amount.
Hi, Elaine. We have a couple questions before we move to the next slide.
Okay, sure.
The first one is, I guess, in regarding to earned income. Would this include the Social Security supplement regarding working income limits?
Okay, Patricia, would you say that again?
Would this include the Social Security supplement regarding working income limits?
Okay. Whenever they're talking about the supplement, that is, I guess that's something that is provided for the person that is under retirement age, or like whenever they retired and then they're not quite 62 yet. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes, that is the question. That's the Social Security supplement that they're referring to.
Okay, that Social Security supplement is usually not reported to Social Security for wages. That is considered another benefit. It has nothing to do with that you're still physically working and being paid every 2 weeks for. So from the experiences that I have, those supplements do not show up on the Social Security profile.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, so if an individual is retired and they're drawing monthly payments or a lump sum from TSP or a 401k, does this count as earned income and go toward the $18,240 limit?
Again, that $18,240 is because you're working, and this is the payment that you're receiving from that particular employer, or it's self-employment and you're paying yourself because of a business. But any type of income of a 401k, pensions, any of that, that's something that is supplementing your financial plan. It has nothing to do with your Social Security records.
And then the other question is, so the suspension option is only for individuals that are close, either 6 months, not 3 years, to their full retirement age?
The amount that we were just going over is for the person that has filed for Social Security retirement benefits and they have decided to continue working. So therefore, as long as they are under full retirement age, 62, 63, 64, 65, and in this case, when the year that they turn 66, it's going to change. But 62, 63, 64, and 65, you are under full retirement age. So therefore, this particular amount would be associated to you as long as you were working. But then whenever you get into the year that you're attaining full retirement age, or the month that you actually attain full retirement age, that is going to change. As for how much you can earn, the $48,600, or if I'm in my birthday month, I have no limit. And that's strictly based on your particular earnings. No additional earned income is counted in those particular amounts. Are we good, Patricia?
Yes, I believe so. Somebody asked, if you retire at the month of full retirement age, you can work and make amounts of income and no benefits will be withheld without limits?
That's correct. They're listening well, Patricia.
Great, thank you.
Okay. We are moving along to spousal benefit. A benefit for a spouse, no matter what, the eligibility is that they get 50% of that full amount. So regardless if your employee took their benefit at 62, they have a spouse, and at that point, they would like to know if they're going to get 50% of the reduced rate or is it 50% of their full rate. It's always the full rate. That's where we look at the 50%. We're not going to reduce a spouse unless at the 50% level, they're not full retirement age. So if they take their benefit at 50%, and they're only 62, there's going to be a reduction factor that's associated to that benefit. So if the spouse has their own benefit and it is less than 50% of the beneficiary or the larger wage earner, then what we do is combine those particular benefits. So let's do an example. You have a person that is a spouse, and they are eligible for $500 on their particular record. But then we look at the larger wage earner's record, and they're eligible for $2,000. So the first step is looking at 50% of the $2,000. That leaves us $1,000. So that is what the actual spouse is entitled to. But now we need to see if they're eligible to receive that full $1,000 from the larger wage earner's record. So now I looked at the spouse's record, and $500 can be paid from their record. An additional amount can be paid from the larger wage earner. However, we have to add them together to bring them to the amount of $1,000. So that means that you're going to get $500 from their own record, and as the spouse of the larger wage earner, they will get another $500 from that record to bring them to the $1,000 amount of 50%. It's not to be looked at that they get the 500 and they also get 1,000. No. What we will do is combine both records to bring them to the limit of 50%. Now, I know that's a lot, so Patricia, I will pause for questions if there are any.
Yes, I believe somebody made a correction to their original question. Is there a number of years that an employee can request a suspension for the, I believe they're talking about the earned wages.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I understand the question. So when the actual wage earner is working and they decide to suspend, is that the question? That
yes, she means suspension for earned wages.
Okay. For instance, at 62, I'm still working and I'm above the 18,240. I will constantly be in suspension until I get into my full retirement year. At that point, if I'm not over the 48,000, then the suspension will go away. And then, of course, whenever I turn full retirement age, then I can make as much as I want. There's no such thing as a suspension. But if you are suspended and your spouse is collecting a benefit, they will also be suspended until you are back to being eligible to receive the benefit. You have to receive a benefit for anyone else to receive it too. I hope that clarifies it.
I think so.
Please.
Somebody just wanted you to explain the spousal benefits briefly again. But yes,
Okay.
They said that does help. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. When you look at spousal benefits, automatically, if you have at least 1 year with that eligible wage earner, the spouse is eligible for 50% of the benefit. But now we need to know if we are able to pay that particular spouse the benefit, because it doesn't matter. The bottom line is I have 1 year of marriage with that particular spouse. I am eligible to receive 50%. But it could be that I'm eligible for benefits on my own record. If that's the case, I must file for benefits on my record first. And then the larger wage earner will be, their particular record will be looked at, and we will determine that their full amount and take 50% of that full amount. Remember, it has nothing to do with the benefit that we are paying the larger wage earner. It doesn't decrease their particular amount whatsoever. So in the example that I gave is that on my own record, I am getting $500 at my unreduced rate. When I look at the larger wage earner's record, the person that I've been married to for at least 1 year, I see that they are eligible for $2,000. Automatically, I'm entitled to 50% of that. So I know that that particular record is worth $1,000 to me. So the next step is to combine my benefit with the benefit that I can receive as the spouse of the larger wage earner. So I can receive $500, but on my spouse's record, I'm eligible for $1,000. I'm not going to get the $1,000, but I need to be increased to that $1,000 amount. So therefore, I will get $500 from my own record, and I will get another $500 from the larger wage earner's record, and combined, I will be at the 50% level or the $1,000 amount that I would have been entitled to if I did not have my own record. That is the easiest way that I can explain that part, but please let me know if there's still some questions on that particular example.
Yes, there's a few questions coming in, Elaine. The first one is, does the spouse have to be deceased to get the 50%?
No, we're only talking about living number holders right now. We're going to get into actual surviving spouses and surviving benefits in just a moment.
Okay, the next question is, what if your record is lesser or less than the larger wage earner?
Okay, that's the example that we're in right now. So, at this point right now, my particular record is only worth $500, but the larger wage earner, that particular spousal benefit is $1,000. So what happens is that we combine the $500 from my record and combine it with an additional $500 from the larger wage earner. That's where we get to that 50% level or $1,000. So that's what happens whenever the spouse is less than the 50% of the larger wage earner. Now, there's two other scenarios that go along with spousal benefits. There is the particular larger wage earner and the spouse, but their work histories are very similar. So that means that, for instance, I could be the spouse that my maximum benefit was $1,800, but my spouse is still considered a larger wage earner because their maximum is $2,000. But if you look at 50% of the larger wage earner, it's still $1,000 that I'm entitled to receive because I have at least 1 year with that particular spouse in marriage. And at that point, I would collect on my record, and my larger wage earner would collect on their record. Yes, I'm entitled to 50%, but I'm not eligible to be paid. That leads to the last scenario, that I might be a spouse that did not have a work history or did not have 10 years or 40 quarters associated to my Social Security number. In that particular case, that means that I'm not eligible for benefits on my own Social Security number. So now, my particular larger wage earner is collecting benefits, and I want to collect 50%. because I've been married to this person for at least 1 year. So therefore, I can file directly on their record and receive the $1,000, and it will not reduce the $2,000 that larger wage earner is receiving from Social Security. So there's 3 distinct examples, but one thing does not change. As long as I've been married for at least 1 year, I am eligible for 50% of the larger wage earner's unreduced benefit. That does not change. However, because of the spouse's work history, it may change as for how much I will receive from that larger wage earner's record. Patricia, does that clarify some of the points that we're coming across?
I believe so. There's a few questions coming in for former or divorced spouses, and I believe that's your next slide.
Yes, it is, Patricia. Okay. Now, when we're talking about benefits for divorced spouses, that means, number one, that you have a marriage certificate and a divorce decree that encompasses 10 years of marriage or longer for your record. So, it always happens. They said that they were married for 10 years. They come into the office, they send in their documents, and it turns out that the judge finalized the divorce with 9 years and 9 months. You have to have documents that show that it has to encompass 10 years of marriage or longer for you to qualify for benefits being an independent divorced spouse. When you do, you have to be unmarried. You cannot remarry before the age of 60, which is a little bit different than eligibility when you are 62. But the rule is that you have a marriage and a divorce decree that has lasted for 10 years or longer, and you haven't remarried before the age of 60. Now, if that is the case, you're 62, and that's going back to spousal benefits. If you have your own record and you only have an amount of $500 on your own record, and we look at the larger wage earner, and you are entitled to $1,000 from that particular record, we are going to combine the $500 from your record and combine that with the larger wage earner of that $500 to bring you to the 50% level. So, in other words, what we have built on is the spousal benefits, understanding that you only needed to be married for a year. But we have moved on to the benefits for divorced spouses, and we have learned that you have to have at least 10 years. But the principles have not changed. You're only entitled to 50% of the benefit. Now we need to find out if there's eligibility of you to get that particular amount based on those three scenarios that we just reviewed. So, the biggest item to remember, if you're 62 and you're collecting the benefit and you want to continue working and you're collecting this combined benefit, you're still limited to how much you can earn because you're under full retirement age. That is a point that I cannot say enough. The bottom line, as long as you're under full retirement age, you are limited to how much you can earn while you're working.
I have a question that just came in that says,
Okay.
if you are married 10 years and you get divorced, you may be eligible for benefits from your ex.
Okay. Again, we're looking at, number one, if you are 62 years of age and your ex is at least 62, it doesn't matter that they haven't filed. That's another difference. But if they have, you're considered an independent divorced spouse. So if that is the case, you can still file on the larger wage earners record, even though a record does not exist on that larger wage earner. So if you get $500 from your own record and you know that you can get an additional $500 on their record, you do not have to wait for them to file for benefits. At that point, you would receive the $1,000. But it is really important to have those documents available, the marriage certificate and the divorce decree. Some people come in with the marriage certificate, don't have the divorce decree, and whenever they request it from their local county office or pathonetary's office, they find out that the judgment was less than 10 years. So if they don't have it, they do not qualify for the benefit. The bottom line is, you look at your own record first. If we can pay an additional amount, we will do so from the larger wage earners record to bring you to that 50% amount.
Thank you, Elaine. I did receive one question, several questions, and I think they're all related. What if someone is married twice and has two 10-year marriages? Which spouse benefits would they get? Essentially, can they choose which benefit to get from a specific spouse's record?
They wouldn't be making the choice. Social Security would. If they have a marriage certificate and a divorce decree that has two separate entries of that they had 10 years, we're going to pay them the higher amount. So there wouldn't be a choice that, for whatever reason they decided, well, I want to, do number one first, even though they're lower. But a lot of times they find, well, let me put the screws to the first one and then I'll switch over to the second one. No. If you give us the documents, we will determine which one would be more advantageous to that particular applicant. So they would get the higher amount, whatever it may be.
Thank you. The next question is, what if someone gets married before the age of 60 and then divorces before 62, can they still apply as a divorced spouse?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. As long, again, must have 10 years of marriage before the divorce went through. If they have the documents, they're not married at the time they file. It could be 62, 63, whatever. They would be entitled because they divorced the next person before they actually applied for benefits. But they will still need to provide that document that they are divorced from that subsequent marriage.
Thank you, Elaine. And the next question is, how many ex-spouses of at least 10 years of marriage each can file against one person? Can a current spouse still file against the same person?
Yes, they can. And going back to my claims, whenever I did this about maybe, oh, wow, it's going over about 13 years ago, the situation was that and this is what happens whenever you're working from home, your telephone rings. Mm-hmm. But anyways, what we're looking at is that I had a client from West Virginia. He had 3 marriages, and he had 9 children, and they were all scattered through these marriages. That particular marriage, number one of his first spouse turned 62 first. They were able to qualify. He had a younger woman, and when she turned 62, it was within a year. The third one that he divorced, he was married. Thankfully, she just made 10 years, and there was a third spouse that was on that record. Subsequently, these children also received benefits up until they turned 18. So if you have the time and the energy to marry as many times as you want, then as long as you have a marriage certificate and a divorce decree, we will pay based on that particular individual. And it would be off of one record. And yes, it is a soap opera.
I have 2 more that came in. As a divorced spouse, if I earned more than an ex-spouse, am I eligible to receive benefit and not apply until my full benefit?
Well, that's going into that previous question that I asked to hold off for this next slide. So let's hold that for just a moment, because that is the next slide that we're going to talk about. Do you have any other questions before we get into that, because of the laws that have changed?
Sure. What is the limit, again, of how much you can earn under a full retirement age while receiving the former spouse benefits?
Okay. If you could please, if you could go back to slide number 12.
Yes.
So each Social Security number and any particular beneficiary that is under full retirement age, if they are working, it's $18,240. and that's if they're under full retirement age. The year that they attain full retirement age, the amount is $48,600. And then, of course, their birthday month, they have no limit for the month of full retirement age, because, of course, after this year, it's going to slightly go up. And it could be that a person that was born in 1955, their particular full retirement age month would be 66 and 2 months. So therefore, they would just have to wait those additional 2 months to qualify for no limit.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about some of these laws that are changing. And a lot of this went into effect based on deemed filing as of January 2nd, 2020. So that means for those that were born either on that date or after of January 2nd, 1954, that there has been some changes in the law. So let's address some of those changes. Number one, as of January 2nd, 2020, and this should answer the question regarding if I can hold off of taking my benefits if I want to collect on my spouse. As of January 2nd, 2020, if you want Social Security benefits, you must apply on your record first before we even look at your spouse's record. So therefore, that choice that we had went away as of January 2nd, 2020. The bottom line is Congress changed that particular ruling, and at this point, we no longer have the choice of collecting a spouse's record before they wanted to have those delayed retirement credits, or they wanted to wait till a much later date in which to receive that particular benefit. If they want the benefit from Social Security, they must apply on their own, and then we'll see if we can give them additional benefits from their spouse. Now, when we're looking at deemed filing, and you qualify for your retirement or a spousal retirement, regardless if it's a divorcee or not, you have to apply for both benefits. That definition is what we call deemed filing. So therefore, if you file for one, you're deemed to file for the other. And if you don't become eligible until a later time, because maybe the larger wage earner has decided that they were not going to file for until a later time period, it's still what we call a deemed filing. And this applies to any of us that turned 62 after January 1st, 2016. So if someone is asking, when did the law change? It changed January 1st, 2016. And those that have been grandfathered in, they were able to pick and choose which benefit that they wanted up until those that were born before January 2nd, 1954. It's a hard pill to swallow, but Congress felt that that was the best way in which to administer the program of Social Security and still keep it solvent for the next generations and the generations to come. Patricia, does that answer the question that came before about the laws that have changed?
I believe so, but if there are any other questions, I suggest people go ahead and submit those through the chat.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the benefits that children may qualify for, and I touched on it a little bit when I was talking about spouses, but I want to really go over the details as for how they may qualify. So, of course, the first point is that the child must have either a parent who's disabled, retired, or entitled to Social Security benefits. And a parent who died after having worked long enough in a job where they paid Social Security taxes. So therefore, it could be a younger worker that they may have only had 3 years paid into Social Security. However, they may have passed away. And at that point, if that's the case, it is very possible that if they were working, that the child would be eligible for benefits. Now, when you're talking about a living number holder or a retirement benefit compared to a survivor benefit, there is a difference as for how much you're going to receive. But at this point right now, let's just focus in on a auxiliary benefit for a child. What we're looking for is that this child must be unmarried. They could either be younger than the age of 18. If they are a full-time student and they're in high school, then we will continue to pay that up until 19 and 2 months. But if there is a little darling that doesn't want to graduate from high school and they do not have a disability, we will terminate the benefits at 19 and 2 months. And of course, if they are 18 years of age or older, and they were deemed disabled before the age of 22, then that would get into something that we call disabled adult child benefit. So in that particular case, the child will continue to receive those particular benefits as long as they live. And at that point, if there has been no improvement on that condition, then that particular benefit will continue long after the parent or the number holder has passed away. So therefore, as for a child, they still have to go through these rules and restrictions. However, there are different ways that they can still continue to receive benefits, but there is a criteria for them to apply. Now that leads me to the next big question about survivor benefits. When we were talking about a living number holder, we were talking about that they or a spouse or a child, they're entitled to 50%. But if that larger wage earner or even a smaller wage earner, if they pass away and that particular person is 60 years of age, they have not remarried, or they have divorced before they applied for this benefit, at this point, what we can do is give them the benefit of 71.5% at the age of 60. Because again, they are that far away from full retirement age. So if they take it at 60, they will only get 71.5% of the survivor's benefit. But if they were at full retirement age, then they will receive 100% of the deceased worker's benefit. Works very similar to retirement benefits. The closer you get to full retirement age, the more you receive in your benefit. But the eligibility for a widow or a widower, we're looking at the age of 60, they can get the benefit of 71.5%, and at that point, they will be able to receive that benefit. However, let's talk about your employee that says, well, I want to start collecting this at 60, but I'm still working. That doesn't change how much they can earn. That goes back to the slide number 12, that they can only earn up to $18,240, again, because they're under full retirement age. They get to the year they turn full retirement age, it goes up. The month that they attain full retirement age, there's no limit. Those rules do not change. So when we're looking at this slide of 17 of the survivor benefits, remember, the eligibility is not 62. If you are considered a surviving spouse, you can start receiving it at the age of 60. This is the exception to the rule that of the change that just went into effect this year, that I can collect my survivor benefit and then I can switch over to my own benefit at full retirement age, or whenever I exceed what I'm receiving from my survivor benefit, and have less of a reduction factor, because now I have gotten closer and closer to full retirement age. So I've taken my particular benefit at the age of 60 as a survivor because my spouse passed away. I'm still working. I only make about $18,000 a year. Now I am 66 and 2 months because I was born in 1955. I am now eligible to switch over to my own benefit because it's a lot higher and it's an unreduced payment. Or I can say, you know what, I'm still working. I may want to have those delayed retirement credits that improve my particular benefit by 8% per year. And then when I turn 70 years old, I'm going to actually collect my benefit and switch from my survivor benefit to my own. And now I have maximized how much I can receive from Social Security. So For survivor eligibility factors, if it's a child, they have to be unmarried and under the age of 18. If they're still in high school, they can receive these benefits up until 19 and 2 months. If you have a disabled child, they have to be disabled before the age of 22. And if they were already on a survivor benefit as a child and now they're an adult at the age of 18, we will now look at their particular application as an adult, a disabled adult child. So therefore, even though they may have been disabled prior to 18, they were looked at as a child for the disability decision. But once they turn 18, we have to look at them as an adult to give them a disabled adult child decision. So it's not automatic, because just because you had a disability as a child does not mean that this condition cannot be tolerated and that you could still work with that condition once you became an adult. So it's not an automatic decision. Now, as for a widow or a widower or a divorced widow or widower, they can get full benefits, again, at full retirement age, but if they take it early, there is a reduction. But if you do have one of these applicants that is disabled at the age of 50, or they're caring for a child that is under the age of 16, or they have a disabled adult child that they're caring for, they can also receive this survivor benefit. Patricia, any questions on that?
Yes, there is a few questions. Someone asked if I am 62 and drawing my own Social Security, my spouse is older than I am and is working until his FRA and then will draw his own Social Security. Did you say that my Social Security will be reduced because my spouse earns over the $18,240 per year?
No. Remember that $18,240 has to do with your own personal employment earnings. So if you're working and you're under full retirement age, and if you're wondering if you are going to have a reduction or a suspension of your particular benefits because of your work, that is only about you. It is not about your particular spouse. Since they're older, then they may be already at full retirement age, and if they continue to work, then it's very good that they will probably not have any limit because they've already attained their full retirement age. You have to look at that Social Security is an individual number, so these rules apply to them individually. So therefore, those limits that I was talking about have to do with the worker. So if you're working or if you're receiving benefits and work is a factor because you're under full retirement age, that is your amount. And if you have a spouse, they have the same amount as available to them as well. So it's never a couple situation that we're only going to look at $18,000 for earnings.
Thank you, Elaine. The next question is, can a survivor spouse receive the death benefits for their deceased spouse under the age of 60 if they are working?
Okay, I think the second part, could you repeat the whole question again just to make sure?
Sure. Can a survivor spouse receive the death benefits for their deceased spouse under the age of 60 if they are working?
The bottom line is for survivor benefit, you have to be at least 60 years of age. So if they're under the age of 60 and they were looking for surviving benefit, they don't qualify until the month they turn 60. So they can't be younger than 60 and collect a survivor benefit.
Thank you. The next question is, so if a child was disabled at birth, do you need to get this on record with Social Security Administration?
No, but I will say that any documentation that is available of showing the disability, if that they keep that information available, or they might start keeping a file of that disability. So if something should happen to the parent that now that child is eligible for benefits, at least they would have the medical evidence in which to provide for the disability determinations unit to review and award those benefits. But as for us, we, unless there is a benefit that is to be paid out because of, either that the parent is filing for a retirement benefit or disability benefit, or something that the child is now entitled and eligible for, at that point, that's whenever we would need to see those documents, but not before.
Thank you. And the next question is, what if the child becomes permanently disabled after the age of 22 and is unmarried?
The disability has to be identified in the medical proof before the age of 22. So if the disabled adult child becomes disabled and the only medical evidence that they have is at the age of 25, they would not be able to qualify for those benefits from their parents.
Thank you. And I do have another question. Is a widow's survivor's benefit reduced based upon the widow's own earned benefit, similar to the spouse benefit?
Everything is looked at individually. So if we're looking at a survivor claim, we're only working with the history of that particular deceased worker. If we're looking at your particular Social Security benefit, any of the reduction factors have to do with you. It has nothing to do with if you were previously married or if there was you are a widow or widower.
Thank you, Elena. I'm just going to do a quick time check. It's 3:10 if you want to continue to the next slide.
Thank you. Okay, other survivor benefits. When we discussed this a little bit, and at this point, when we're looking at a parent that you may be caring for, and they are receiving at least 1/2 financial support from their adult son or adult daughter, and they passed away, at that point, that's when we consider a parent benefit. So you have an elderly person, let's say that they're in their 80s, and that particular elderly parent, they may not have any income, they weren't married, that they could draw a benefit as a surviving spouse or a divorced spouse. They were consistently looking at the income of their particular children. So at that point, something happens to their son or daughter, they're left with no income. If they show that they were dependent on their son or daughter, at that point, they may qualify for survivor benefits under that rule. The lump sum death payment is still $255. It has not changed. And this is the case that has been instituted since 1935. So if you are able to show proof of that you're the surviving spouse or a child that is eligible for the benefit, there's a one-time payment of $255. So if it was split between two people, such as there might not have been a surviving spouse, but two children, the $255 would be split between the two children. Next, let's talk about Medicare. Medicare is the availability of Part A, which is your medical insurance. Part A is your hospital insurance, and Part B is your medical insurance. That goes with the $144.60 payment or premium that is due on a monthly basis if you are receiving Social Security benefits. Now, for Social Security purposes, all we do is enroll the Part A and Part B. If that person is receiving benefits, we will automatically take $144.60 minimum out of their check once a month. If they want an advantage, or better known as Part C at the time, that is the supplemental or the additional HMO insurance that pays the 20% that Medicare will not pay for. That's a separate cost. That's something that each individual would have to go to a health provider to decide. If they're looking for a drug prescription plan and it's not part of their Advantage plan, that is an additional cost. Again, that is something that Social Security does not administer, and either speaking directly with Medicare or that health provider, your particular employee can decide what they would like to do. As for, this is where a lot of people get confused whenever they're talking about the special enrollment period of Medicare Part B coverage. You have an employee that is working. They retire at the age of 65. So you refer them to at least get enrolled in their Part A or their hospital insurance, which is free to them as long as they have 10 years or 40 quarters. But they defer having Part B because they feel that their federal insurance is enough and they don't need it. Well, with the special enrollment period, once you separate from your particular job and you are outside of the initial enrollment period of Medicare, which is 3 months before your birthday, the month of your birthday, and 3 months after your birthday. When we look at the special enrollment period, we're saying to you, you're outside of that particular umbrella. you left your particular position, you have 8 months in which to enroll into the special enrollment period from the last day that you worked. So let's say that you ended up that in January you decided that you were older than 65, you left your particular position. Now you're in the month of August. This is the last month that you would be in your special enrollment period, because as of coming on September 1st of this year, now you will be outside of your special enrollment period, and that means that there may be a penalty associated to your Medicare Part B of your particular coverage, and that penalty would never go away as long as you have it. So this is all to say, I'm outside of my special enrollment period. It's September 1st. I didn't sign up by August 31st. So what do I do? At that point, you would have to wait until the general enrollment period. That means that you would have to wait until January 1st and must sign up for the coverage by the 31st of March. Your coverage for Part B will not start until July 1st of 2021. At that point, Social Security would calculate if a year had passed from the time that you actually filed. At that point, it could be that you have a 10% penalty associated to the premium. And as I said, that premium is $144.60. So that would mean that $14 would be associated to that $144 and increase your premium. And each year, as you know, premiums continually go up. So therefore, that means that that penalty would not go away. So it is very important that your particular employee understands when they need to sign up for it and what they're doing if they decide to refuse Part B and they just take Part A. The examples that come through the Social Security office is that you have employees that have left the federal government. They have taken their federal health benefits, and now they're 80 years old. They did not take Part B of Medicare or the medical insurance, and now they are finding that Medicare pays for certain procedures that maybe their federal health plan does not pay for. And at that point, they look at that they're looking at a 15-year penalty or a 150% penalty above the premium, and that is less affordable as if they should have taken it when they turned 65. So that is the biggest example that I can explain to you that indicates what happens if you do not take it during either your special enrollment period or if you're in your initial enrollment period and not working or currently working and being covered by your employer. And if you notice, the information on the following slide goes over, again, about the general enrollment period and how those effects will happen or go into existence from January 1st to March 31st of every year. Now, if you look at the Medicare standard premium for 2020. This is the standard rate. However, if there is a prescription drug coverage monthly premium, then it could be that you would have an additional amount that you would pay based on your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years ago. So in 2020, those particular beneficiaries, we went back to their 2018 tax return, and we saw that if they were an individual that earned $109,000 to $136,000, they would have an additional $31.50 added on to their premium of $144.60 that would be associated to them for 1 year. Every year, we will go back and look at your tax return from 2 years ago and readjust. If you are not in that particular modified adjusted gross income, then that particular surcharge would go away. So let's talk about that in regards to when enrolling is not automatic. Bottom line, if you don't have benefits from Social Security or the Railroad Board and you need Medicare, you need to apply. The initial enrollment period is 3 months before you turn 65, your birthday month. You have it until 3 months after. That's considered your initial enrollment period. There is the Extra Help program that is available for those that have lower income and they need extra help with their prescription costs. Please look at socialsecurity.gov for extra help, or either contact your state's health insurance provider. Here in Pennsylvania, our particular program is called the Apprise program. In West Virginia, they just call it their West Virginia SHIP. And the joke that I always hear from them is if you go to Ohio, it's O-SHIP. So that is one of the little acronyms that we love to share. Now, I'm going to go right into the online calculators, going into the WEF calculator and the GPO calculator, as I had indicated at the beginning of the information that we started on this journey. Bottom line, the windfall elimination provision, a lot of people will come to you weeping about having the WEF as part of your pension. The bottom line is, if you're 62 and you were employed after 1985 and you were actually looking that you weren't paying into the Social Security pension, that your particular employer had you not take Social Security taxes, you are going to be affected for it. Please remember that the windfall elimination provision, the normal computation is that 90% of your first $960, and if there is 32% of the next $4,825, 15% is the remainder. However, in a WEP computation, 40% of the first $960, 32% of the next $4,825, and 15% of the remainder. If you want to keep it easy, I would suggest that if they do not go to the WEP calculator, and they just want an idea as for how much they're going to receive, refer them to their My Social Security account. It is going to give them the amount that they are expected to receive at the age of 62, and tell them to subtract $465 from that amount. They will find that that is pretty close to what they would receive from Social Security. There are exceptions. If you have substantial benefits of 30%, 30 years or more, you will find that you will not have that much of the reduction factor. That is the maximum that you'll be able to receive. But if you have only 20 years that you've paid into Social Security, then your reduction factor would be 40% in that benefit formula. I know I'm giving you a lot of numbers, but here's another chart that would give you that particular information on a retirement benefit that's taken at 62 is going to be reduced, again, by 25%. That hasn't changed. But, of course, the older that you get and closer to full retirement age, then the less that reduction factor will be. Lastly, we're going to talk about government pension offset and that type of reduction that may affect some spouses and widows. And if that's the case, again, there is the government pension offset calculator that they can find out if there is going to be a reduction. But if they have their own history of having a Social Security benefit and they paid into it, they will not have the reduction. So, my last slide, government pension offset. Again, 2/3 of the amount of the non-covered pension will be used to reduce the Social Security for the spouse or the widow or widower's benefit. There's an example. You have a $1,200 non-covered pension, meaning that you did not pay into Social Security. 2/3 of it, you will receive $800. So if the Social Security spouse or the widower benefit is $750, guess what? There will be nothing payable to that particular applicant. However, if you have a spouse or a widower benefit that's $1,000, then we would have $200 that would be payable after we do that computation. So that is it for me. Now I know that we can go back, if you could please, Patricia, that you may have some additional questions. And this is, kind of new for us. But if you go back to the slide number 2, again, my name is Elaine Cole. I'm the Public Affairs Specialist from the Pittsburgh area. I hope you enjoyed the information that you've received today. And if you do have additional questions, please feel free to contact me at elaine.cole@ssa.gov.
Thank you, Elaine. Do you have just a minute or two for one or two questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So I think this is a Medicare question here. So the general enrollment period is for employees that are still working and age 65 or older and currently participate in an employer health plan?
No. It's not the general enrollment period. The general enrollment period is for the person that is outside of that they are no longer working and they didn't sign up during the special enrollment period. The special enrollment period is for that particular worker that they may be 66 at that time, and they have left their particular employer who had them covered under the group health plan, and at that point they have 8 months in which to sign up for Medicare Part A and or B, and they can do that 8 months after their last day of work, and they will not incur any penalty.
Thank you. And somebody needed a clarification. If you're still working at age 65, do you have to apply for Medicare or wait until you retire, then enroll?
This is an optional situation. First of all, there are employers now that have health savings accounts, and under the laws of Medicare, you cannot have Part A or Part B or any part of Medicare and still participate in the health savings account. Well, as it stands right now, well, my particular agency isn't participating in that. So at this point right now, if I was 65 years of age, I would sign up for my Part A because I would just have my application, and it's just an additional amount of coverage if something traumatic would happen, because sometimes Part A will pick up some of those bills and alleviate some of the bills that are coming to your group health plan. So therefore, it's really optional. You really don't have, if you're still covered by a group health plan, you don't have to rush down or go online and file for your Part A. It's really not necessary. But a lot of people tend to do that because it doesn't hurt to have that Part A. Another benefit would be if you're 65, you're still working. A lot of people here in Pennsylvania, they use that Medicare Part A card to get a discount for public transportation. So sometimes that comes in handy.
Thank you. And just two more quick ones. If you retire at your retirement age, do you still get affected by the Windfall elimination provision?
That's correct. If you do not qualify or be exempted from, like, because you had 30 years or more paid into Social Security taxes, you will have not only the reduction for your age, you will have the reduction for the Windfall elimination provision.
Thank you. And somebody specifically is asking if they're the high Social Security earner, will their teacher spouse Social Security benefit be calculated at the full or actual after the Windfall rule?
What we do is calculate whatever the full amount would be. At that point, once we calculate that wage earner's record, then we apply the Windfall elimination provision. But it could be that that particular worker hasn't collected their pension yet from that federal agency, meaning that I'm 65 years old, I'm going to defer my particular pension from that particular agency right now because I'm going to continue working, and maybe, I should say 66. Let's say I'm 66 years old. I'm still working with my particular federal agency, and I know that I can start collecting my Social Security now without any reduction. So I decide to do that. I do not have the windfall elimination provision because I haven't started collecting my federal pension yet. So therefore, I'm letting my civil service continue to grow. I'm still working. I decide to retire at the age of 70. And at that point, that's whenever I need to report to Social Security that I'm a federal employee entitled to a civil service pension. And at that point, that's when they will start reducing my Social Security. But for 4 years, when I turned full retirement age at 66, I was collecting my full amount from Social Security, and now I have decided to change over to my civil service. And I still may collect from Social Security, but it will be at a reduced of the windfall elimination provision.
Thank you, Elaine. I know there was a few other questions that came in, but unfortunately we did run out of time.
Okay.
And I did make sure to note on the chat and gave them your email address for them to follow up with you directly with any individual questions.
Perfect. And like I said, please don't hesitate to contact me. And if you can, Patricia, if you want to share those questions with me via email, I'll be glad to do so.
Thank you, Elaine.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.